when the courthouse in Henrico County, Virginia was engulfed by a fire in 1865. It was said that the blaze had consumed all legal records. It was commonly believed that all documents had been lost to the flames, turning decades of Virginia's recorded history into ash. But in 1973, something unexpected occurred. During a renovation project on an old building, workers in the basement discovered a secret buried behind a collapsed wall. As the workers continued their renovation, they noticed a crack in the wall, and upon further investigation, they found something that shouldn't have existed: an iron strongbox, sealed and hidden, containing documents that had been deliberately preserved. These documents were not official records, but personal letters, diary entries, and photographs that had never been meant to be seen. The significance of these findings was far beyond what anyone could have imagined. Inside the box were 23 photographs of children, each with striking emerald green eyes and pale blonde hair, a clear indication that these children didn't belong to the enslaved women they were born to. These children, born between 1839 and 1844, were from Henrico and Chesterfield counties in Virginia, all from one father. The photographs were haunting. The children's expressions were too old for their years, their eyes piercing, their features distinct from their mothers. It was a glaring, unspoken truth captured in images, something systematic and deliberate. Nature and importance of the documents. When the documents were opened and examined, it became clear that these weren't ordinary records. These were testimonies, personal accounts, and photographs of enslaved women's lives, stories deliberately erased from history. The photographs inside, captured in daguerreotype, showed children who had pale, almost ethereal features, eyes so strikingly green that they were impossible to ignore. Their faces were haunting, far too mature for their age. Their appearance, marked by distinctive European features, set them apart from their mothers and other children in the quarters. The lost history unearthed. These documents and photographs uncovered a history that had been deliberately hidden for over a century. They were not just about the physical features of the children, but the larger, darker truth about the systematic exploitation and violation of enslaved women. This discovery was not just the uncovering of a few forgotten records. It was the revealing of a deeply ingrained injustice that had been swept under the rug by history. The documents revealed how enslaved women had been victimized by powerful men, their children born out of violence and secrecy. And yet, in the eyes of Virginia law, these women were considered property. Their bodies and their lives had no legal standing. The law couldn't or wouldn't protect them. But the documents, the photographs, and the testimonies that had been preserved were an undeniable record of the abuse they had suffered. Conclusion: the discovery's impact. The discovery of these hidden documents didn't just offer a glimpse into the past. It forced the world to confront a painful, uncomfortable truth. These weren't just the stories of a few women and children. They were part of a much larger story about the realities of slavery, the suffering of enslaved people, and the brutal systems that kept them oppressed. But through these documents, the voices of those who had been silenced for so long were finally heard. The documents found in the strongbox were not just historical records. They were the testimony of the past. The discovery proved that even though the system tried to bury these truths, they could not be erased. And now, decades later, historians like Dr. Hayes were ensuring that these stories would not fade into obscurity. The names of these victims would live on, not as nameless slaves, but as real people whose experiences mattered. The truth had been hidden, but now it was brought into the light, forcing people to reckon with the dark legacy of slavery. It was a legacy that could not be buried, no matter how many years passed, no matter how many walls were built to keep it hidden. The discovery of the documents and photographs marked the beginning of a long and painstaking journey of investigation and verification. Dr. Eleanor Hayes, a historian specializing in antebellum Virginia, was contacted to analyze the records that had been unearthed. When she first laid eyes on the strongbox, she could sense immediately that she was about to delve into something far more significant than mere old papers. As she examined the daguerreotypes, she was struck by the eerie beauty of the children they depicted. Their pale blonde hair, striking emerald eyes, and delicate features seemed so out of place among the enslaved people they were born to. The documents were filled with unsettling details: names, birth dates, plantation locations, and most disturbingly, the word "his" written next to each child's image. It didn't take long for Dr. Hayes to realize that this word was referring to a single man, someone whose actions had left an indelible mark on these children's lives. The fact that the children shared such distinctive physical traits was no coincidence. They were linked by one unacknowledged father. But as Dr. Hayes began to cross-reference the names listed in the documents with public records, plantation birth registers, land deeds, and census data, she found a chilling truth. The names of the women, their children, and the land deeds all matched. The children depicted in the photographs were real, and the evidence of their births was irrefutable. She also found the name of the father, Jonathan Blackwell, the second son of one of the wealthiest and most influential families in the region. Over the next several months, Dr. Hayes meticulously pieced together the story. She tracked the movement of Jonathan Blackwell, cross-referencing his whereabouts with the timing of each child's birth. The evidence was undeniable. The timeline was clear. Between 1839 and 1844, Blackwell had fathered 23 children with enslaved women, and his visits to the plantations lined up precisely with the births of each of these children. It was systematic and deliberate. As she sifted through the records, Dr. Hayes also spoke to the few remaining descendants of the families involved, hoping to understand the full extent of the story. She came to realize that, aside from the physical evidence, there was a quiet resistance within the families of the enslaved women. There was a sense of quiet acknowledgement among the community, a shared understanding that what had occurred was neither random nor a series of unfortunate events. It was a calculated and horrific act of exploitation by a man with the means, opportunity, and protection of the law. Dr. Hayes's discovery had far-reaching implications, not only for her academic work, but for the way the history of slavery in the United States would be understood. She published her findings in December of 1974 in the Journal of Southern History. The paper, which was titled The Blackwell Case, Systematic Sexual Violation and Legal Impunity in Antebellum Virginia, was a comprehensive account of the 23 children, the pattern of Jonathan Blackwell's visits, and the damning evidence of a crime so monstrous that it was deliberately hidden away for over a century. What Dr. Hayes found in those records was more than a story of exploitation. It was evidence of the lengths to which some people would go to suppress the truth. But the discovery and the painstaking research process were not the end. Dr. Hayes's work was a crucial part of a larger effort to understand the legacy of slavery in the United States, especially as it related to the women and children who had been victimized by the system. Her efforts made sure that these women were not forgotten, their suffering was acknowledged, and their voices, once silenced, were now part of the broader conversation about slavery, justice, and historical memory. This journey of discovery, however, did not end with Dr. Hayes's research. Her work prompted more questions than answers, leaving the lingering question: what had happened to the children, the 23 children who were the product of such horrific circumstances? Were they still alive, or had they disappeared into the fabric of history, forgotten and erased, just like their mother's suffering had been for so long? Dr. Hayes's dedication to uncovering the truth and bringing the story to light sparked an even deeper investigation into the descendants of these children, people who had no idea that their ancestors had been part of a tragedy so hidden and so horrific. It was a story that had been buried for generations, but one that through tireless research would now be shared and acknowledged by the world. It was a testament to the persistence of truth, even when the system had worked tirelessly to suppress it. In the end, Dr. Hayes's work was a crucial step in remembering and acknowledging the unspeakable realities of slavery and ensuring that the stories of these children and their mothers were never buried again. Through her determination and the powerful documentation she uncovered, the legacy of those enslaved women and the brutal reality they faced could no longer be ignored or forgotten. Their story and their truth would finally be given a voice. The response to Dr. Hayes's publication and the subsequent reactions in both academic and social spheres marked a significant turning point in the telling of this tragic and overlooked story. As soon as her article, The Blackwell Case, Systematic Sexual Violation and Legal Impunity in Antebellum Virginia, was published in December 1974, it sparked a wave of mixed reactions that highlighted the challenges in confronting uncomfortable truths about the nation's history. On one hand, there were scholars, historians, and activists who saw Dr. Hayes's work as a monumental step forward. It was a daring and thorough documentation of something that had been largely ignored or actively suppressed by mainstream narratives of American slavery. These supporters praised the rigor of her research, recognizing the depth of her commitment to uncovering the story of these enslaved women and their children. For the first time, these women's suffering was acknowledged, and their stories were being told in a way that gave them agency. something they had been denied for so long. However, the reaction from a significant portion of the academic and public sectors was not so kind. Critics in the academic world accused Dr. Hayes of sensationalizing the story, accusing her of using extreme examples to condemn the entire institution of slavery. They argued that, in focusing so intensely on the personal suffering of enslaved women and the specific case of Jonathan Blackwell, she had missed the broader context of slavery and had distorted history by focusing too much on one instance of abuse. They claimed that her emotional and impassioned approach was clouding her scholarly judgment, and that she was applying modern moral standards to a historical system that they argued was simply a product of its time. The criticisms were not just academic, they had real-world implications. Dr. Hayes's findings posed a direct challenge to the sanitized traditional narrative of slavery that many Virginians still clung to, one in which slavery was portrayed as a necessary evil, a system that, while imperfect, had been essential to the economic and social fabric of the Southern states. The idea that slavery was inherently brutal and exploitative, particularly in terms of sexual violence, was a hard pill to swallow for those who had long defended the institution or viewed it as part of the region's heritage. In Virginia, particularly, the response was more visceral. Many saw Dr. Hayes as an outsider, an academic from the North challenging a system they held dear, one that they either justified or tried to forget. For the descendants of the Blackwell family, this discovery felt like a personal affront. They had spent decades cultivating their family's good name and ensuring their legacy remained untarnished by the ugly reality of slavery. To have their family's dark secret brought into the light was not just embarrassing, it was deeply threatening. The Blackwell family's reaction was swift and aggressive. Edmund Blackwell, the patriarch of the family, was particularly vocal in his denial of the claims made in Dr. Hayes's research. He used his power and influence to attempt to discredit the findings. He issued statements calling Dr. Hayes's work slander and accused her of attempting to damage the reputation of a prominent Southern family. The Blackwell family engaged lawyers, hoping to intimidate Dr. Hayes into retracting her publication, or at the very least, discrediting her research. They filed complaints, threatened lawsuits, and used every legal and social means at their disposal to suppress the truth. In spite of their best efforts, Dr. Hayes remained resolute. She had done her work thoroughly, and the evidence was irrefutable. Her article, despite the pushback, was an undeniable testament to the reality of sexual violence during slavery. It was based on careful, meticulous research that spanned multiple years, cross-referencing various historical documents and corroborating testimonies. The critics who claimed she was sensationalizing the matter had no evidence to undermine her findings. As the public reaction grew, so did the intensity of the efforts to silence Dr. Hayes's work. The Blackwell family, unable to erase the truth, resorted to more extreme tactics. In 1842, a group of vigilantes burned down Reverend Isaiah Grant's church, Mount Zion, the site where many of the mothers who had borne Jonathan Blackwell's children had gathered in secret. This act of violence was clearly meant to send a message, not just to Dr. Hayes, but to anyone who dared speak out against the entrenched system of slavery. It was a message that attempted to intimidate and silence the voices of those who had suffered under the system. Dr. Hayes's work had sparked not just a historical debate, but a social and political firestorm. The attack on Reverend Grant's church was a clear attempt to intimidate and punish anyone involved in challenging the status quo. It became increasingly clear that the forces aligned with the old order would not go down without a fight, even if it meant using violence to preserve their power. In the face of this overwhelming opposition, Dr. Hayes's resolve only strengthened. She knew that her research was not just about uncovering a single instance of abuse, it was about exposing the larger systemic issues that underpin slavery as a whole. The law, as it stood at the time, had failed to offer justice to these women or their children. In the face of such institutionalized injustice, the truth had to be spoken, even if it would cost her personally. Her work had brought the victims out of the shadows, forcing the world to reckon with a part of American history that had been hidden for far too long. It had illuminated a dark chapter that revealed how deeply the institution of slavery was entangled with racial and sexual violence. By shedding light on this issue, Dr. Hayes had forced a reckoning with the uncomfortable reality of slavery that many had hoped to leave in the past. Despite the pushback, Dr. Hayes's publication became a cornerstone of scholarship on the sexual exploitation of enslaved women. It opened the door for further investigations into the systemic nature of slavery laying the foundation for future research into the intersection of race, gender, and power during this dark period of American history. The publication marked a turning point in how historians and society at large would view the legacies of slavery and the survivors who had been left behind. Dr. Hayes's unwavering commitment to telling the truth, even in the face of personal risk and societal resistance, ensured that the voices of the victims would not be erased. And while the immediate aftermath of her work was a bitter and divisive battle, it paved the way for a broader conversation about justice, reparations, and the enduring impact of slavery that continues to resonate to this day. Though Dr. Hayes's work was met with hostility, she had succeeded in making sure that the story of Jonathan Blackwell's systematic sexual violations would not remain buried. Her research laid bare the horrors of slavery that the system had tried to hide, and for that she would forever be remembered as a historian who brought the unspoken truths of American history into the light. In the final part of the story, the descendants of the victims, the survivors of this generational trauma, continue to carry the weight of their ancestors' suffering, even as they also bear witness to their strength and resilience. Dr. Hayes's efforts to uncover the truth did not simply end with her research. They laid the foundation for a new chapter in the legacy of those 23 children, the women who gave birth to them, and the system that sought to erase their stories. After Dr. Hayes published her research and brought the Blackwell case into the public eye, her work was met with both recognition and fierce resistance. Yet, it was only the beginning of an ongoing journey to honor the victims and bring awareness to their suffering. The descendants of the 23 children born with emerald eyes, many of whom had long forgotten or never known their ancestors' painful history, began to piece together the truth. For them, the revelation of their lineage came with mixed emotions, gratitude for the recognition, but also sorrow for the trauma their ancestors endured. In 1978, Dr. Hayes organized a gathering for the descendants of the women and children from the Blackwell case. It was a poignant and emotional occasion, held at a church near the former site of Mount Zion. The church burned to the ground as a warning to those who dared to speak out. The gathering was a powerful and cathartic experience, where 23 descendants gathered together for the first time. Some were already familiar with parts of their family's painful past, while others were hearing the full extent of the tragedy for the first time. In this intimate setting, the attendees shared stories and experiences passed down through the generations. Some spoke of the emotional scars that had been carried silently. Others recounted family legends they had been told by grandparents, and some spoke of the unanswered questions that had haunted them for years. This gathering became not just a moment of connection, but a reclamation of their history, a defiant refusal to let it remain hidden. Each person present carried the weight of their ancestors' survival, but also their resistance. They stood in defiance of the system that had dehumanized their forebears, and by coming together, they gave those ancestors a voice that had been silenced for too long. One of the most emotional moments during the gathering was when Dorothy Mitchell, a descendant of Hannah from Riverside, stood up to speak. She talked about her great-great-grandmother, Hannah, who had suffered greatly from what happened to her but had never fully recovered. Dorothy described how Hannah had raised her great-grandfather, Thomas, but remained emotionally distant, as if something inside her had been irreparably broken. Dorothy shared how her family had always said that Hannah's heart had been broken, but now, with the full knowledge of what had been done to her, it became clear that it wasn't just a broken heart, it was a shattered soul. The descendants of other women, such as Ruth, Esther, Mary, and Rebecca, also shared their stories. They spoke of how their ancestors had managed to raise children under the most unimaginable circumstances, how they had somehow found a way to survive, to love, and to protect their offspring despite everything. Each descendant expressed the painful complexity of knowing that their existence came from violation, but also how that knowledge had shaped them into individuals who could not and would not be erased. The stories of survival, resilience, and strength were shared not just to honor the victims, but also to recognize the inheritance of courage that had been passed down from one generation to the next. As the women and men in that room sat together, there was an understanding that their very survival in a world built to oppress them was an act of resistance. Despite the recognition that came from Dr. Hayes's work, the history of those 23 children did not belong solely to them. It also belonged to the system that had created them. The continued existence of those children's descendants, and the strength they carried, served as a stark reminder of the injustices that slavery had imposed on countless people. Through the years, the truth about the Blackwell case slowly became undeniable, but not everyone welcomed it. The Blackwell family, still holding on to their wealth and power, fought against the growing acknowledgement of their shameful legacy. Their attempts to suppress the story and erase the historical marker in Virginia, which commemorated the victims, only fueled the fire. The historical marker, initially torn down and vandalized twice, eventually remained in place, serving as a constant reminder that the system had failed to erase the truth. In time, the marker became accepted, and even the Blackwell family could not suppress the truth any longer. The descendants of the 23 children were finally being recognized, and their truth could no longer be silenced. In 1991, the state of Virginia erected the historical marker at the site of Fairview Plantation, recognizing the systematic sexual violence that occurred there. The marker read, "On this site stood Fairview, a tobacco plantation where systematic sexual violence against enslaved women occurred between 1839 and 1844. 23 children were born from these crimes, marked by distinctive features that served as evidence the legal system refused to acknowledge." This marker stands in memory of the victims and in recognition that justice delayed for more than a century is still justice owed. Although it was vandalized twice, it was eventually left in place as a permanent symbol of remembrance and acknowledgement. Despite the resistance from some quarters, the marker became a part of the landscape of Virginia's history, a constant reminder of a past that could no longer be ignored. As time passed, the descendants of the emerald-eyed children continued to gather. Some felt compelled to understand their roots, to honor the legacies of their ancestors, while others struggled with the trauma. For many, the healing was not about forgetting the past, but about understanding it, embracing it, and ultimately finding peace with it. Dr. Hayes's research had sparked a movement that would change the way this part of American history was remembered. In 2006, Dr. Hayes passed away at the age of 75 after spending over 3 decades researching the Blackwell case. Her legacy, however, lived on through her work. She had brought truth to light, ensuring that the voices of the enslaved women and their children were heard. Through her research, the survivors of the Blackwell case had been given a place in history, and their stories were no longer hidden. As for the descendants of the 23 children, they continue to carry the memory of their ancestors, and their stories are now part of the wider narrative of slavery's horrors. Some of them have had DNA tests confirming the connection to Jonathan Blackwell. Others have chosen to see their inherited traits not as a curse, but as a sign of survival, of resistance against a system designed to dehumanize them. The Blackwell case, the story of the 23 children with emerald eyes, is more than just a historical anomaly. It is a testament to the resilience of those who survived and a reminder of the horrors that shaped American history. Their truth, no matter how uncomfortable, has been documented, preserved, and honored, and it will never be forgotten.